Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast series powered by openbusinesscouncil.org, citiesabc.com, and fashionabc.org, and in future as well, sportsabc.org. A pleasure to be here again talking with global leaders and thought leaders and entrepreneurs that are changing the world, and as well coming up with new solutions for the problems we face as a society. I'm particularly excited today to talk about a couple of areas that are very dear to me, and actually I grew up among them. That is with a personality and as well a thought leader and as well industry expert that I've been following for some time. And we're going to be talking about the fashion industry, the textile industry, and all the areas between United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and how we can look at this. So I welcome to our series Isaac Nichelson. And I will be reading a couple of some of his achievements because there's a lot of things, and then we'll kick off with the interview. So Isaac Nichelson is a global entrepreneur and a creative leader with over 25 years in the industry of textiles and apparel industry, but as well in fashion. He's known for propelling cutting-edge products and market innovation in the realms of sustainability and circular resource efficiency. Is the founder of Circular Systems.com, which we're going to be talking today. And he has been working with all the top global brands of textiles and fashion, which includes the global Hemp Group, the House of Marley, Hilarus Ferry, and the likes of H&M and a lot of others. Isaac has a comprehensive, I would say, quite unique capacity to look at textile, fashion, technology, and circular economy and sustainability like very few people in the world, has been building a cutting-edge solutions of creating new fabrics, new solutions, where actually mix different areas, and as well as a creator and an entrepreneur. And part of the work he's been working and been building is to build eco-friendly and sustainable textile, fashion, apparel brands. As one of the pioneers to promote sustainable textiles and fashion, the California Apparel News named him the Eco Johnny Pleased in 2007. And I know I like to call him like one of the novels of fashion, because what he's doing is propelling fashion into ecosystems and different things. So from some of the different things he's been doing, besides being the CEO of Circular Systems, which he founded in 2017, and is a social purpose company providing the world-leading technologies transforming waste to value in the textile and fashion industries. The Circular Systems company has received the prestigious Global Change Award in March 2018 for the company's AgroLoop technology that converts crop waste into high-value material suitable for textiles. The award was issued by H&M Foundation. With over 2 decades of experience in sustainability and fashion, Isaac is as well regarded and as well thought leader in the space, and he's been always looking at ways of taking things and pushing the boundaries and solutions how we can actually improve the apparel, the fashion, and the textile industry. And he's been contributing with groundbreaking different industry reports, like the 2017 report from Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Let's Make Fashion Circular. And Isaac is also a member of the Edmund Hillary Fellowship, the Levis Collaboratory, and the Textile Exchange. So I could go for a lot of more things. I think probably one of the things as well in the events has been involved is the Global Recycling Forum and the moving behind sustainability and a lot of different things on these areas. So welcome to our series, Isaac. It's a pleasure to have you here finally.
Thanks, Dinis. Nice to be here.
So Isaac, so let's start by the beginning. So for someone that has been on the fashion industry for this time, but as well for being a groundbreaking personality that really thinks the fashion, but as well produces and actually innovates, how did you came out with this, and what was your first initial inception into this, and a bit of your background?
In terms of what inspired Circular Systems, or the effort in sustainability and fashion in
No,
general?
you first, then we go to the company. So from your background, if you want to tell us a bit of your background.
Yeah, sure. So I started in the industry actually as a sponsored athlete, and working in the surf industry in my early 20s here in California. These are sports that are so tied to nature, whether you're surfing or snowboarding. I mean, even skateboarding, you're really dealing with the natural laws of physics. And so a lot of healthy respect for nature. And also through my upbringing in the Pacific Northwest, you know, I was raised by back to the land hippie activist people from here in California. So environmentalism and social justice is really in my blood. And when I started to get entrepreneurial after seeing how interesting the back room of design and manufacture was at these surf companies here in Southern California, you know, I started to go into this idea that snowboard outerwear was an area that was untapped. And so created a snowboard outerwear brand with friends that ultimately had a pretty big impact on the aesthetics and function of snow outerwear in the early 90s. And in the process, I saw how toxic fashion is. The products we were making at the time, these technical waterproof breathable materials, were nylon based with PVC based durable water repellency, you know, from fluorocarbons, and PVC based laminates for waterproof breathable, about as toxic as you could get. And one day at our factory in Portland, Oregon, this in about 1994 or 95, I went in while they were cutting some of these new materials from Japan for our jackets. And the smell in the factory, the off-gassing and the toxicity was so intense, I had to leave after a few minutes. It was making me sick. And I imagined what it would be doing to the people we knew so well working in the factory. And it really rocked me in terms of where I was putting my energy, my creative energy with my career, really, you know, attached at the hip to the oil industry and creating all this toxicity in the world by making these really fun products. So I started looking at solutions to begin to design products differently from that day forward, and ultimately committed my career to moving the needle in fashion toward, you know, what is now a circular and regenerative goal. You know, our goal used to be to try to hit zero waste, but I think with what we've done with Circular Systems over the last few years is change that conversation from a goal of net zero to a goal of regeneration and repair and healing of our habitat through fashion. So that is the purpose of my career and my creativity, and that's what we're doing with Circular Systems now.
Oh, that's a fantastic background. And so how did you convert from the sports to become a fashion designer? So it's something that came, but I think I would like to touch that part. And I know that we spoke a bit about that, but I would like to hear for our audience as well.
Yeah, well, I was always a really artistic kid and found my art to be gravitating more toward commercial applications and design from a pretty early age. And so when I saw the way clothing was being designed, it was something I knew I could immediately do. And I just really started doing it hands-on with my own company there in the early 90s, and studied from, you know, various individuals along the way, had a big influence on me. After doing snowboard outerwear design, which is really the most technical products in apparel, you know, hundreds of pattern pieces, all these different trims and finishes. Once you've done that, designing more standard apparel, it becomes more about aesthetics and a lot less about technical knowledge. And so applying the technical knowledge I'd gained doing technical outerwear to fashion came next. And ultimately I was invited over to Italy to work with some of the big fashion houses through a creative company in the mid 90s there, and through some of the distributors of our snowboard products. And wow, the opportunity there with massive budgets for product development to begin to play with some of the first sustainable fibers was really what set me off in this direction, to start to design not just clothing for the aesthetics or the function, but actually design the yarns and the fabrics ground up. And once I started thinking in that way, it really took me into the more whole systems approach and to the idea of designing systems then, not just products. And ultimately, Circular Systems is a systems design solution. What we have in our industry is a design problem, like in much of the world. We've created a fashion system that's built on extraction and toxicity and really old guard economics driving it as well. And so it's now about changing the design of that system, and that's really where we're taking it at this point.
So from this experience, of course, you touch the biggest challenge. So the fashion industry in general and the apparel industry is the second biggest polluter in the world. But one of the things that has been continuous in your career, and as you mentioned, you build not only a knowledge that is quite unique in the industry, but you position yourself first as a thought leader and as an innovator, and then as an entrepreneur as well. So can you tell us how you went from finding the challenge that you saw with your own eyes, from the pollution to all these issues that coming out of this, but as well becoming an entrepreneur and then shifting this as both an entrepreneur, thought leader, and creator? So if you can talk about your trajectory as an entrepreneur and how do you build this career?
I think, the entrepreneurial bug is something you're born with. I think most people either have it or they don't. And for me, realizing I was interested in commerce inherently, and loving to design things, it was then about making that interest in doing business and dealing with this world of commercial align with my values and my ethics. And that's really what pushed me into exploring how can we make things better? How can we be more responsible in the way that we design and manufacture fashion products? So it was in that alignment between the way I was raised, my values, which are deeply rooted in social justice and environmental justice, being expressed through my work in fashion. And that's really what led me to, I'm an autodidact and I study constantly, everything I see, I'm absorbing. And I began going deep down the rabbit hole of how fiber is produced in every sector of our industry, and what are the problems with those methodologies, whether it be the way conventional cotton is grown and the destruction of farmland, the massive production of CO2 and toxicity through the extraction and refinement of oil. These are the things that drive our industry. 90% of all product in our industry is, virgin polyester and conventional cotton. And so finding a lot of inspiration in the potential for solutions, it seemed apparent to me that this is an awareness game. I need to let everybody I know in the industry understand what I'm picking up here, which is we have a systems design problem. It's extractive, it's toxic, it's going to destroy our farmland and the communities where it's happening, and in the way it's being produced, it's bad for people and bad for biodiversity. So naturally, I wanted to communicate that to my peers, and I started in the streetwear and fashion industry geared toward youth markets with action sports. The surf, skate, snowboard industry and the street industry I grew up in is where I started to preach, sustainability as a goal, and ultimately to switch that conversation to circularity and regenerative production as the goal. So by banging my head against the door of all these big companies for years, trying to get them to buy organic and recycled products at a very early stage, this goes back to 99, 2000, and in the earlier aughts, being turned away from those meetings multiple times, told, I was a hippie, or somehow, this was a crazy idea. I heard it all. I even heard from a company that claimed to be about nature that it was just too expensive to save the planet right now. We can't pay an extra dime for these recycled or organic products. So all of that wound up inspiring me actually to create brands and to consult companies to help accelerate this change. And I think that's how I became involved in the global conversation. And I'm really grateful for having the chance to communicate, on the global stage in many senses. And honestly, fashion is the vehicle for this awareness building around circular economy, around regeneration, around protecting biodiversity, and really healing our natural systems. There's no vehicle like fashion to create a global trend. You combine that with popular culture and music and film, and that's how awareness shifts. So one of the reasons I've stuck with fashion and have chosen to innovate in this space is that fashion is also this incredible mouthpiece to the world about what needs to happen next, not just aesthetically, but in terms of these movements. So I see expressing myself in this sector is more powerful than other industrial sectors because of the influence it can have ultimately. And that's, I think, why I chose to stick with fashion as the system to work on. So thought leadership rooted in values and expressing that here in fashion because it's a powerful platform to do so.
Fantastic, and congratulations for this fantastic work, which is really, I've been learning a lot from you, and then as well understanding this. So let's look at a bit of macro space before we go to your companies and achievements. So like I said, the fashion industry, the numbers differ, but it's around $2 to $3 trillion direct business, but indirectly it's everyone, because everyone has some kind of apparel or fashion or fabric in their houses, in their clothes, and so forth. But this is actually, like I said, the second biggest polluter in the world, is actually the second biggest employer of women in the world. And it has a lot of layers, like you said, from the commodities and the cotton and all different things that are produced, then to the paintings and all this coloring and so forth that we use. And then it goes to the design, to the fashion, until it becomes, of course, haute couture, in some cases, pieces of history and culture and so forth, and all the iconography that comes out of this. And now we have as well fashion tech, and as well a lot of wearables. So how do you see the industry at this epicenter that we are right now, both the apparel and the fashion industry?
I see an industry right now that's in a massive transition and the beginnings of change that's coming like a tidal wave, driven by regulatory control. The industry right now is suffering from a commercial standpoint. Markets are down. Companies are hedging on orders for the next season because they've got too much inventory right now. That's trickling all the way down in the supply chain. So things are suppressed. And in this moment, the tendency in the past, when the industry hits these moments, has been, if there's any progress with innovation happening, especially around sustainability, it's usually getting shelved for next season while everybody just figures out how to survive. And I think what's different this time around, as we see this, macroeconomics hitting fashion, is that now there's no opportunity for brands to go back just to the quick and dirty. They have to keep innovating, and the emphasis really has to shift more and more toward authentic adoption of better product, whether that be recycled, circular, or truly organic and traceable products, regenerative products. The brands now are being forced by forthcoming regulations in the EU, and now New York and California look to be stepping on board with similar laws around a recycled content in all products, around transparency and traceability, meaning physical and digital traceability in all sustainable fibers. So it's about to get very real for the major brands in the world who've been making mostly a marketing effort to date. The real execution at scale is starting to be forced on them, and the real mandate for transparency as well. A lot of that driven by, the Xinjiang cotton slavery scandal in China, modern day slavery in the fashion supply chain is very real. And that now is driving this true tidal wave of regulatory change. So the industry is at this inflection point, and there's just not enough scaled innovation that's cost effective, where quality is comparable to conventional, and where it's really scaled. I mean, there's the delivery of thousands of tons a month of raw materials to just one brand is hard to meet for most innovators right now. And the cost of scaling production, the speed at which that's happening is not in any way keeping up with the forthcoming demand. And a lot of that's because the big brands that need to offtake these new materials are externalizing the cost, for the most part, of building these new infrastructures. Change needs to happen at an industrial level. That means some infrastructures need to change. But we're at this point right now where the brands have not yet realized if they don't step in and begin to co-fund at a higher level the setup of new infrastructure, they're not going to have the ability to produce to these new regulatory requirements. It can't all be externalized on the manufacturers, who are ultimately making the least money also in the value chain. So we're at a real catch-22 inflection point moment for fashion right now. It's change or die, but the big brands are not genuinely changing that fast. I think it's very challenging for them to change their old ways, especially quickly.
That's a big challenge, and I think probably the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges we're facing right now, is how we deal with all this disruption and change, but how we can actually do it in a way that creates better business and so forth, which is not an easy part, and it's part of your thinking and different parts. So let's look at your companies, and I have a lot of questions still. I know that you have limited time. So in terms of your company, so let's start. You have a track record doing a lot of things, but let's start with the Circular Systems. So can you tell us, for people that don't know about you, what is Circular Systems, what it does? And I know that you have a lot of IP, a lot of different things, but what you guys doing is really cutting edge. And I would like people to know how we go from the theory to the practice, because you're actually creating a lot of solutions that are very concrete and can actually make a big difference for the world.
Really a technology company and a solutions provider to the fashion industry. Our essential focus is transforming what people see as waste now into valuable raw materials, and really changing a perception of waste itself. It's no longer waste. It's actually a critical raw material input. And what we focused on initially is cleaning up the industry, starting with post-industrial textile waste recycling, and that's under our TextLoop Arcot platform. So we recycle cotton as a focus now. We're moving into cotton polyester blends as well. Our emphasis with TextLoop has been on a more strict methodology for sorting machines in slightly different ways than other manufacturers might, to get a more quality fiber, as opposed to just focusing on throughput. So much of recycling is about how fast can you get it done, how much can you make in a day, as opposed to focusing on what quality can we attain with the resulting raw materials in recycling. And so that's really been our approach with TextLoop. And with TextLoop Arcot Primo, we've become known for the most premium recycled cotton fiber in the market, which results in the finest yarns. And that means finer thread counts, finer yarn gauges up to 60 singles and rings spun, which, if you know yarns and fabrics, that would make a very sheer wovens, or really sheer slinky knits for intimates. So making these kind of fine yarns is difficult with recycled fibers, with mechanically recycled cotton. And we've managed to do that successfully and consistently at scale. And that's really what Circular Systems has become known for in textile recycling under our brand and our platform, TextLoop. What we've done recently is work to get our own special global recycled standard certification class for these fine yarns, which actually are not possible for most manufacturers to produce and get that GRS certification. We have a special methodology in our process. It's been audited extensively, and that's given us this RCOT Primo certification class. So it's actually an exclusive to be producing yarns this fine with recycled cotton in the ring spun system. So in short, TextLoop is moving toward solving problems around post-consumer recycling as well, especially as we work to launch new technologies for managing cotton and polyester blended waste. Those blended textile waste streams are the biggest in the world and are largely burned the world over because when it's not 100% cotton, textile waste tends to be seen as very low value and doesn't have a lot of applications in textile to textile recycling. But we've managed, in working with institute partners, to come up with a new way for segregating cotton and polyester using a very low impact process that's just water, heat, and pressure with a tiny amount of biochemical to segregate these two constituents and separate that cotton from that polyester. So that will be forthcoming with the TextLoop separator technology to be launched in Portugal in a partnership there for a new TextLoop mill that we hope to be rolling out in 2025. So on the flip side, we have really what's known as one of the halo technologies, promising the potential for regenerative natural fiber processing, and that is AgriLoop. With AgriLoop, we process agricultural waste streams, specifically looking right now at the food crop versions of linen or hemp. So oilseed flax, oilseed hemp, also the medical crop versions of hemp, CBD hemp being used for textile fiber. For the whole concept is to go after crop waste, not purpose-grown fiber crops for the AgriLoop inputs. Also moving to look at cereal straws as well to prevent the burning of these crop wastes, to prevent the rotting of these agricultural residues is the goal of AgriLoop. Right now, the burning and rotting of crop waste globally is a massive climate and human health impact. The burning impacts human health all around areas of India and central United States, when big crops of wheat and rice are burned every year. That impact is up to 26 gigatons approximately on an annual basis, just India and the US burning crops alone. And the impact of methane from crops rotting in the tropics is potentially even larger, as methane is far more impactful on our atmosphere even than CO2. So producing a natural fiber from these forms of crop leftovers is what AgriLoop's doing. We've commercialized it now with oilseed and CBD hemp, with oilseed flax, and now with pineapple leaf. So working in some really fun new pilot programs around pineapple leaf processing. We will be beginning to close the loop for the first time with the AgriLoop system. This really proving our patent as we begin to deliver the effluent of our production as a fertilizer back to the same fields where we collect the crop waste. Creating that circular and regenerative system using the waste of our process to make the soil more fertile is really the goal. of AgriLoop, in addition to preventing that rotting and burning. And that's beginning to happen this year in pilots in Costa Rica and Mexico. So it's a really exciting year for AgriLoop in this proof of concept mode. And as we scale the production of non-purpose grown fiber, these beautiful bast fibers that we're taking from food and medical crops. Circular Systems is in a scaling mode globally. We license our technologies and our brands to manufacturers. We produce and sell fiber to these licensed yarn spinners and fabric mills. And at this time, we're operating throughout South Asia, in really the global seat for cotton production there in Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. We operate in China. We have entities in Europe, Canada, and the US. And we really work at the top level with global brands and retailers to create solutions for them to meet their sustainability goals. And then go back into supply chain, working with our fibers, essentially to replicate fabrics that are some of the programs and some of the biggest impacts in lower impact compositions, and using that TextLoop Arcot or that AgriLoop hemp biofiber in these setups to really change the core products at these big brands and radically reduce impact as fast as possible. So it's a consultative approach in working with the brands and providing solutions, and then a collaborative approach with the global supply chain to execute and deliver that.
Well, first of all, congratulations. It's a massive amount of work and innovation that you guys are creating. And as well as a lot of new ways to look at these things and to look especially ways of taking this forward. So I would like just to touch, if you could right now, for less technical people listening to us, because I always like to demystify things. So one of the things you just mentioned, for instance, fabrics made out of pineapple and waste and so forth. So can you try to simplify this for people that I'm sure everyone wants to be more sustainable, especially young people listening to us, or tech people that are not into fashion or fashion tech or innovation? Can you just try to explain a couple of case studies, or one or two at least, that actually explain how you are doing these things and how people can benefit from this? Not just the B2B, but as well general people of the audience, although most of my audience is business and tech. So everyone should be aware of this and be part of this.
Absolutely. To demystify the AgriLoop process, it's essentially taking crop waste sourced from farmers or farming communities or co-ops, bringing it first into mechanical processing to separate the fibrous part of the plant from the other parts. That fiber then gets taken into additional mechanical and biochemical processing steps to soften it and to create the right, to make it this that can be drawn and go into the conventional systems globally. So these steps of initial rough refinement, further mechanical and biochemical refinement, it's all and what is the energy, the opportunity for changing impact comes in. When you use biochemical approaches, you can really reduce your impacts compared to traditional synthetic approaches. When you use a better energy mix, renewable energy as opposed to coal energy, you see an incredibly improved impact, of course, in production. So it's every choice that's being made and the best practices around how materials are handled and processed that actually creates the change. And in the case of AgriLoop, it's a patented process around all these steps of fiber extraction and refinement. I hope that's a little simpler.
No, that's fantastic. And I think for people listening to us, I think this is really it really can actually have fantastic fashion and brands that are part of your ecosystem. And I want to touch, that's my next question. So you build an ecosystem, like you mentioned, with a lot of tech, IP, and innovation, but you have as well a lot of brands using your product. So from your ecosystem, and you can go, of course, we'll put all the links to your company and to your social media. What are the brands that you're working close that are using this, and what can people find? You mentioned surf. I know that you have fashion, that you have lifestyle. There's a lot of things that are already working.
Yeah, I mean, you can find these products, been produced by major brands and retailers in fast fashion, such as H&M, and their sub brands like Arquette and COS. We are working with Bestseller Group, who are also our investors. Brands like Jack and Jones are adopting now for denim. You'll see a rollout of Agrolute biofiber with Gap and Old Navy coming later this spring. And then lots of small, cool brands out there in the world who've been adopting on a regional and global basis. Other companies like Madewell and Nike, in the mass market, really trying to go for the jugular of impact and work with the biggest companies we can who are making the biggest impacts has been our initial strategy. But now we're also really working on ways to provide smaller volumes of fabric to more young designers or smaller brands as well. That's been the recent challenge, is how do we get this to everybody, not just the big companies.
Fantastic, and congratulations for that. So I know that we have 10 minutes, so I want to still go for a couple of questions. So one of the things you mentioned, and that is key in all your narrative, is the way you work with the concept of circular and regenerative economy. So, and of course, in your website, there's a couple of studies about this, especially in the About Us page and other sections where you're going to be linking. So your values is about circular tech and regenerative impact. So can you describe this, because it's a very important thing, and I know that you are as well part of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So how can actually companies look at circular tech and regenerative impact? Because it's a concept that is, of course, fantastic concept, but very few people know about it. Probably Ellen MacArthur Foundation and all our other organizations are focused on this, but we need to democratize this more to actually to everyone.
Yeah, so in looking at the systems thinking that backs up circular technology, the idea of circular economy or circular materials flow, I mean, it's really pretty simple in its essence. It's that there is no such thing as waste. Everything we call waste right now is actually valuable raw materials that needs to come back into the process and go into the same or other materials again. And that circular materials flow, you can look at almost any industry that's using materials to build anything and see the way already in the last 20, 30 years, there's been massive progress made in reuse and recycling, as opposed to this old take, make, waste model that's very linear and extractive. So to take it from the ground, whether it's a tree or a plant or oil, make something, use it, and throw it away is the old model. And the new model is actually to recapture that value, whether it's at the post-production stage or at the post-consumer stage, retrieving that value and putting it back in the system to become value again. It's just biomimicry. It's the way nature works. When the leaves fall off of a tree, they decompose, and that composted biomatter is feeding the tree again, right? And this is what we need to do with all of our systems thinking. And that's where, when you start to think circular, you start to see big opportunities for fixing things, not just reducing impacts, for regenerating things. Agriculture can be looked at in the same circular lens, as opposed to an agricultural system that's built on extraction and harvesting every year tilling up that soil and releasing all that nitrogen into the air after the harvest, just to make a nice clean brown field, and pouring lots of agrochemicals on there to prevent the weeds from coming back. You know, there's a completely different approach that's more about the continuation of the life in the soil. So rather than tilling that soil up after a harvest, leaving it there untilled for that nitrogen to remain fixed in the soil and to be able to feed the plants the next time around, leaving that microbiology alone in the soil and not killing it with a bunch of agrochemicals, herbicides, and letting that natural system flourish, which ultimately feeds your crops, creates more abundance in your next harvest. So it's really just about seeing these opportunities to transform and move away from extractive practices, and really setting this ball rolling, which can truly snowball in the world around circular production, circular economic theory. Once it gets moving, it becomes really clear that it's more efficient, that resource efficiency is more cost effective, it's more profitable, not just economically profitable, but more profitable for society and for our habitat. So it's just this win-win-win. When people, the more you are committed to true resource efficiency and circularity, the more regeneration we see, and the more proof we see of how economically sound it is. So the more this can be scaled, the more momentum we can develop in the circular economy, the better it is for everyone, you know, for business, for humans, and for all future generations of all living things.
Yeah, this is a key element that I subscribe completely, and I kudos to you and to the organization, but it's not easy, and it's a very challenging part. So one of the things, and this is my last question, because I know that you have to leave in a couple of minutes. So one of the areas that you guys are really focused is the process of traceability. So, and I know that you've been creating a lot of traceability in terms of the different cycle of the apparel and textile and fashion industry. So can you tell us about this part? Because traceability, it's the process, and even describing what is this process, this creates transparency, but it creates a lot of new solutions for any business, and is a key element to reach what we discussed before. So if you could describe this process and how you applying this in practicalities, and how can people engage as well with your company and some of your partners to engage on this process?
Yeah, going back to 2017, we knew we would need a solution to authenticate our sustainable fiber ongoing. What makes this circular? What makes this regenerative? How do we quantify that and prove it as it moves through the value chain globally? So often products can be counterfeited, or products can be, you know, cut, and you can expand a load of 1 ton of organic cotton to 5 tons real quick by blending in some conventional cotton. And this is the way things have been getting done for the longest time in our industry. So how can we prevent that counterfeiting? How can we track our products through these licensees has always been a question. And we began looking at blockchain many years ago, the use of distributed ledger to have that immutable record of what's the origin of this fiber and where is it traveling in the supply chain, to make sure that volumes are not being added along the way, and that it's being recorded as to what materials it's going into and what finished goods and what brand or retailer is it ending up at. Ultimately, so the consumer can trust that what they're buying is authentic, and so that we can understand what is the actual impact of that product authentically. So in looking for years for the right solutions, we've finally come across the beginnings of some really disruptive technology in our industry. And we discovered this with our partners at FiberTrace, who've actually built a patented technology for marking fibers that can be easily and free of charge scanned and read and recorded at each step of the value chain, all the way to retail. It's a technology that comes from banknotes using a small piece of pigmented viscose that gets stuck into the bills. And you often see tellers at banks or cashiers looking at $100 bill or a large bill and seeing that there's this pigmented fiber inside is how they know it's not a counterfeit bill. We're doing the same thing now by blending similar fibers in with our recycled and regenerative fibers with TextLoop and AgriLoop in this partnership with FiberTrace. FiberTrace was a system developed by the world's leading regenerative cotton farmer out of Australia, a group called Good Earth Cotton. In order to authenticate their product and to prevent it from being counterfeited, they came up with this solution and actually built a software called Mapped to verify that these products moving through the system are getting scanned at every step, and actually that data going up in the distributed ledger attached to their software. That gives the brands and retailers who are buying this product the real quantifiable and qualifiable measures to know that they're getting what they pay for, and that they can safely broadcast to their consumer that this is a lower impact product. And here's how we can prove it. So digital and physical traceability, it's going to change the industry. It's about to be mandated in the coming years in Europe and the US to have these traceable supply chains, to understand that a fiber is truly sustainable. It's going to require a physical tracer. And so of all the systems we've looked at, FiberTrace has been the best in terms of its simplicity, its ease of use, and being able to scan it in with that data being in distributed ledger, much different than many of the spray-on DNA-based tracers or metals-based tracers that are currently being proposed, where those products have to go back to a lab and it takes upwards of a week to test them. You know, it costs 120 euros at every step to test. And then that data is being stored in a centralized database. So we just don't see that as a viable solution. And we do see that in this partnership with FiberTrace, where we've just launched some of our first pilots, and the very first products were just debuted at Premier Vision trade show in Paris a month ago. It created a lot of buzz and a lot of excitement to be able to scan these products and see that whole product journey, how those fabrics were created, and to authenticate that the AgriLoop biofiber was in those products. It was the first of its kind, and it's going to become, we think, standard operating procedure and what you could expect at retail.
Well, fantastic. That's it. And this is actually something that should be applied to any industry, and actually a lot of things here that can be considered. So I want to be respectful of your time. So as you said, I know that you have to go. So I want to thank you, Isaac. There's a lot of stuff here. We're going to be, probably I will want you to get a part 2, especially one of the things you have in your website. And I just urge people to look at the website, and as well, we'll put all the links here. You'll see it here behind the interview, but especially the areas related with circularsystems.com. There's a section about constructing interference, a new way of looking at collaboration, a lot of different things, and of course a huge network of partners that include the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, the Fashion for Good, a lot of things that I think everyone should be considered on the day-to-day. Isaac, congratulations. I think it's fantastic since the last time we spoke what you achieved. Congratulations and good success, and hopefully we can actually push more of your voice and fantastic work to our audience. And please, for people listening to us, act, because there's a lot of cool stuff you can do, and you can actually change a bit the world while doing fashion and getting great style. Thank you, Isaac.
Thanks a lot, Dinis. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks everybody for listening.